Sachet, and here we are looking at the beautiful Upton Town Hall. You can see that they put a lot of attention to detail in this. A lot of town halls are fairly boring and utilitarian, but the Upton Town Hall is really pretty. And we have painted the exterior of the Upton Town Hall already because the building itself is just really, really pretty. But even look at the inside, at the details here with the wooden curves and everything. So we're not going to paint the exact inside of the Upton Town Hall because that's not the purpose here, but the idea is, how do you get inspired by a place like this to draw something or paint something of your own? So the Upton Town Hall is somewhere that you can visit, so you can go in and see all of these beautiful details of the balcony and the railing in here, and then just these beautiful arches. And I think part of why I'm drawn to these is because I love, also at the Worcester Art Museum, which is just nearby, has a beautiful medieval chapel in it, which has all sorts of arches, and the chapel's made out of stone, this is made out of wood, but it's the same sort of sense, just the beauty of arches. And they have also these lovely little square stained glass windows in here, so if you like squares, you can be inspired by the square stained glass windows. If you like arches, you can be inspired by the arches. And part of the fun of something like this is that you could go into this space with a group of 5 friends, and each of you could be intrigued by a different aspect of it. So some of you might like the arches, some like the squares, some might like the rectangles and the grids, and so on. So it can inspire all of you in different ways. So let's take a look at this and say, alright, if I wanted to be inspired by something in the Upton Town Hall, what would I in particular be drawn to? I think you guys know my answer to that, which is the way that these arches work. So again, it's not that I'm going to draw the arches. We're going to do something abstract. The question is, when you are doing abstract things and you are thinking about shapes and colors and feelings, what kinds of objects do you end up drawing? So I like to start with pencil because then I can erase it. And it's good to have a eraser, not the one in the end of the pencil because those generally tend to be poor, but a separate eraser is generally inexpensive, and as I just made a mark on my paper, I'm going to give this a shot. They work very well in general, so inexpensive, extremely useful, and they last a long, long time. So if I'm looking at this shape and saying, what do I want to draw that's inspiring me from the Upton Town Hall? I like these arch shapes. I like curves. And to me they sort of feel like trees that are growing and bending over from the weight of their branches. So it's a very natural kind of shape. And I like all these curves in here. And I like that there's also squares and triangles in here. So again, the purpose is not to draw architecturally the different aspects of what we're seeing in here, but it's to think about, if I see something that I find is pretty, how do I interpret that? And part of what I've talked about before is that I don't like things to be robotic, because then it could just be a computer program that drew it. I like things to have texture and shape. Now, funnily, and this is how things get interpreted and designed, this is now looking like a frowny face to me. It's looking like it's 2 eyes, a nose, sort of like the forehead angry lines, and a big frown over here. Alright, so I don't like to draw frowny faces. I like to draw smiley things. But this shows how the things that you're working on start to take on a life of their own. So how would I draw this so that this ends up being more of a happy thing? What if I drew... Does that make it better? that makes it a little better. And the frowny inside, for down shape, what if we put an up shape in there? See, if I put circles in there, then it emphasizes the whole eye shape. And I don't think I want to do that. My aim is not to make eyes. So what if I need some more things out here, so it's less of just an eye. Alright, so that helps reduce the eye feeling. If it's more about this recurring shape. Still got a sense of eye in there, but the human brain is just primed to look for things that look like faces. It's the way our brains work for, you know, all sorts of different reasons. Add some circles in here. And it's still very eye feeling. Maybe once one sees the eyes, one cannot unsee the eyes. Alright. Well, we'll use that as a starting point anyway. Alright, since I'm planning on watercoloring this, I'm going to use a waterproof pen so that the pen does not smear when I add water to it. This happens to be a Jelly Roll 06 Sakura, but it's just what I happen to have. You can use whatever pen you want. Just if you're planning on doing watercolor with it, I would make sure that it's waterproof so it doesn't smear when you start adding the water to it. And I am drawing on watercolor paper so that when I do the watercolor stage, the watercolor paper holds the watercolor well. But if you're just sketching, you can sketch on anything that you want to. And again, in general, my style is to not do things symmetrical, because to me that helps show that it was a human that did it and not a computer program. But your drawing is your own, and you can do it whatever way you want to. Alright. I like little swoops. Movement in my lines. So when you looked at the picture of the Upton Town Hall, and again I highly recommend that you visit when you're able to, what kinds of things stood out to you as being interesting? Is it the grids of squared colored glass, which I also find very pretty? Sorry. You know, it could be the basketball court that you find appealing, because it has all these combinations of circles and lines. You imagine someone who had never heard of basketball saw the lines on a basketball court. They might think that it had important cultural meaning to us. And in a way it does. For many people, sorry, for many people, the shape of the basketball court is immediately recognizable, and it means something to them. You know, for some people it might mean wealth, or for some people it might mean physical strength or speed. All sorts of different kinds of images that come to mind for different people. Alright. Alright, I'm going to change this a little from my base drawing. So I want. Just be careful when you're brushing to wait until it's at least a little dry so you don't make smears on your lines. Alright, so see, this is my abstract interpretation of what I think about when I see the Upton Town Hall. Your interpretation will be completely different because there will be different aspects of it that really appeal to you. And you could do the same sort of technique about anywhere. We're just using the Upton Town Hall because it has a variety of very pretty shapes and interesting textures and such to work with. Alright, so now that we've got that done, you know, we could just leave it as a drawing, or we could take it to the next level and say, what kind of colors would we want to add into this? Well, we could do it in homage to the original here. We could do it in oranges and browns. Or we could do it in greens or blues or whatever other kinds of colors that we wanted to go with. I think I like the yellows and oranges and browns. Let me just move this a little over so I can get to the water. And move this down a little. Move that down a little. Alright, so this is a Phoenix orange yellow. Put that in there. And I also, as I've undoubtedly mentioned before, not generally very keen on painting directly from the lines all the time, because again, to me that would be more like you just have Photoshop and just hit the little fill shape tool. I like the sense that this was done by a person, that people are imperfect, and that is okay. That we should stress less about trying to be perfect and try to focus more on doing the best we can and being happy with what our current best is. I work with teens, and with the teens, they're often talking about their art and saying, oh, I'm not good at drawing, or I'm awful at drawing. And that's a sad way to look at your own skills, because we are all learning and growing, and we're all always changing, and many of these teens are very talented artists, and we are often trained by society to denigrate our own efforts, when instead it would be much better if we said, alright, I am new at drawing, and that's okay. We all start somewhere, and I practice, and I get better at doing eyes, or I get better at doing noses, or whatever the kind of thing is that we are working on. And the more we practice, the better we get. But it's not that we were bad to start with, it's that we were beginners. And being a beginner is a fine thing. And it's better to be a beginner and work on improving than to give up and say, oh, I will never be good enough, or I am awful now, so why even bother? You know, that would be a sad way to approach life. So we'll add some of this color over here, and then make these other shapes. So we're sort of doing homage to the colors here. I happen to have a number of colors in my tin, but if you have just a few colors, like red and blue and yellow and magenta and cyan and stuff, you can mix all the other colors, because orange is simply red and yellow. If you took some red and then mixed in a little yellow at different levels, then you would get a lovely orange. So we got some oranges, and see how I'm using the exact same color, but it looks a little different in different places depending on how thick or thin I put it on. So this is just another layer of the exact same orange. Little kitten. Yes, you are a good kitten. Okay, and you're making it a little hard for me to see what I am painting. Trying to see around you. I suppose it's a good thing that I put the camera up on the clamp tool, because at least you are not knocking things over. Alright, so again, the exact same orange, but just as it gets lighter and lighter. And I like that kind of effect, the gradient effect, that you can see the different shades of it. Yes, sweetie, that's a brush. You are so helpful. So helpful. Alright. Alright, so we got some orange in there. How about some brown? I like this brown. This is a burnt sienna. And again, I like it if it doesn't quite stay in the little area. Give it that sense of motion and things being done by hand versus done by a machine tool that clicks in somewhere and says, fill this in with a color. I'm certainly fond of Photoshop, and I use Photoshop every day for all sorts of purposes. So it's not that I'm saying that Photoshop is a bad tool, but I'm saying when I am hand making something, I like the aspects of it being handmade, which is sort of interesting, because it used to be when people were hand making, quilts or so on, that their focus was on making exact squares and stuff, because at that time that was a sign of being the very best that you could be, to get the squares exactly perfect and the stitches exactly even and so on. That was a sign of skill. And it still is a sign of skill, but nowadays that we have sewing machines, everything can be sewed with the exact even stitching, because that's just the way sewing machines work. So it's no longer a sign of distinction, we'll say. If you give someone something with the stitches are even, we assume that the stitches are going to be even, because we assume it's made on a sewing machine. And it becomes a little more special when it's something that a human being took the time to make and had the skill to make, and so on. So it's an interesting way that our perceptions about things have changed. And it's sort of like when you think about fake candles, for much of society's existence, we were getting our light from candles and other things that flickered. So a flickering light was the normal thing. And then we finally came out with light bulbs, and they still sort of flickered. And now we're finally at the point where we can have a nice, even, non-flickering light through electronics. And even with that, to have a romantic feeling, we make fake flickering lights. So we make lights that fake is the wrong word for that part, but we make lights that will flicker and act as if they are not steady, because we want that kind of effect, because we are mimicking a natural form of light which is not steady. So it is interesting how we do these things where we could be perfect, but we are purposefully imperfect because it gives us an emotional reaction. Alright, so now we've got oranges, and we've got browns, adding some more layers of color into this browns.
I got some spam from some dude in area code 920. That's even a real number.
Here we're going here. Alright, so we're just making abstract shapes that were originally based on the shapes and colors that we saw in the town hall. So now we say, what kind of a background color should we use? And I think I'm going to go with a yellow. And I think I'll go with this pale yellow, in part because when I put the paint in there, let's see if we can more out of this. Oh look, the cat's walking on my wet painting. You have little watercolor footprints you're going to leave all over the place now. So when I squeeze the... Sweetie? Yes, you're a very good kitten. You are such a good kitten. Oh, is now a good time for preening yourself? Now that you have hunkered down on top of my wet watercolor painting. You are a very good kitten. Very good kitten, yes. Alright, so what I was saying is that when I squished this particular yellow out of the tube, which is the Royal Langdon Pale Yellow, it stayed in its curled shape. So I have all these little loops of color there. And I would like it to squish down more into a more of a flat shape. So I just filled that little bin with water, which will soften it up, and then I'll be able to mush it down a little more. So I'm just giving it a second to soften. And during the second, I will see if the cat can perhaps move. Come on, sweetie. So again, when these colors start, they start in a tube. You squish out the paint wet, and then they get into their little bins, and then they dry. Alright, sweetie, you've had enough of kitty lounge time. You have to go that way. Now we have cat hairs. That is alright. So it should be softening now. Yep, so then when that dries back down again, then those will be flatter. It doesn't really matter. It's just easier to work with them with their a flat surface rather than these little mountains of loops. Alright. Now we're going to paint in the background. I know some people who prefer to paint in the background first and then work on the details. And I might have done that if I had a sky or something like that here. But in this particular case, where I was coming up with the colors as I went, then I preferred to think of what I would want the colors to be for these shapes, and then think about what a background might be that would go with them. So part of the fun of doing this kind of a project is that it tends to be lower stress for many people than trying to say, all right, I'm going to paint the town hall, or I'm going to paint the church, or something like that, which people would recognize and see if you did things quote unquote wrong. And again, you know, I'm not keen on those sorts of words or phrasing, but when you're doing it abstract, it's hard for someone to say that it's wrong or right. It's just how you feel about a given thing. You could work on this town hall project once a week for a month, and every day or every time that you do it, you could come up with a completely different idea of what you wanted to draw. You know, this time I wanted to draw the curves and the triangles up here. Another time, you know, I really do like these squares in the background, the squares of color, and that appeals to me greatly. So it could be that one of these times I work on squares of color and see what kinds of inspiration I get from color squares. And it could be that sometimes I like the very lovely oranges and browns that are part of the natural wood aspect of this. And it could be that other times I decide I want to make everything purple, or I want to make everything royal blue or something, depending on how the mood strikes me. And actually, if you look at those little color squares, they have really pretty colors in their blues and oranges and reds and so on. So that would be an entirely different feel to go with those kinds of colors. So it's sort of an insight into your feelings. It tends to be that when we were happier, that we tend to paint in colors that represent our happiness. And again, that's not universal. For some people it might be bright reds and blues. For some people it might be pastels, pinks. And for some people it could be blacks and silvers. We are all different. And that's part of what makes our world so much fun. Alright, I'm still not getting these top loops. If I can just push them down with my fingers. Just squish down a little. There we go. There we go. Just hate to waste paint, even if it's on my finger. I still just paint so. And it's also good to think when you are painting with watercolors, or pretty much anything else, is that colors come in layers. They come in textures. We could sit here and sprinkle salt on this. We can squish it with saran wrap, paper towels to add some texture to it. We can add layers to it. So this could be layer 1, and then we add some more layers of other colors to it. We can add speckles of color to it. All sorts of things we can do. And the more we just relax and play, the more that we expand our creativity. And the creativity helps us not only just in painting, which is certainly a fun enough thing to do, but also in everything, because the more that we train our brain to look at things in different ways and to try new things, the more that we're able to find solutions in all things in life. So it could be that one day you're sitting here trying different things in painting, which is fine, but it could be that in another day you're having financial challenges, and then you sit there and think up different things and you come up with some sort of great solution that helps you in your financial world. And you're able to do that because your brain has gotten good at thinking outside the box, and thinking of new ideas, and when you hit a challenge, to not just stop, but to sit there and say, okay, I've had a challenge, now how do I work on this? So it's about life in general. It is about art in one sense, but art is just a reflection of life in general and how we deal with life. So the more that you're able to try things in different ways and explore things in different ways, the more that your whole way of feeling with life gets improved and better, and so on. Oh, look, there's cat hairs everywhere. I wonder why there's cat hairs everywhere. Cat is laying immediately to the right of my hand. Watching every move of the brush. Alright. So now, I'm going to say, to me some of these areas are still a little too bright. So I'm going to rinse all of that yellow off my brush and go back to this orange yellow, which is over here, and add some more layers into my orange layer yellow so that it's not quite so white against the yellow. Getting better, still a little white on this outside though. I want it to be lighter, but I don't want it to be white. Alright, that's better. And if there's hairs in there, cats have been climbing over this thing. They just brush out at the end, so don't worry about the hair getting stuck in there. It will not get stuck in there. You just brush it out. And I can sit there and try to... I got that one. Try to pick it out, but it's generally not worth the effort, especially if the cats are just going to add more hairs on there every second. Just pull them off at the end. And that is it. Darker here. A little darker in the center. So the more layers you put on, in general, the darker it's going to get because you're blocking the paper more and more. And part of how watercolor gets that glowy effect is from the light going through the paint, hitting the white paper, and then bouncing back out again. So the more layers you put on to block the light from getting to the paper, the darker it will appear, and then the more saturated the color because you're adding more and more paint into those areas. Now it's interesting to me that the brown is now taking on more of a pink-purple kind of feel, the more that we're putting these oranges and yellows around it. So the way that a color appears is greatly affected by the colors that are near it. And you've probably seen this in your own life, that the way that curtains look or wall paint looks or all those other kind of things is affected by the other colors that are near it to make it look more pink or more purple or so on. So as part of the fun of painting is to see how all of those sorts of things work firsthand. Alright, still thinking that these ones are a little light. Let me get that a little darker still. And I find that painting like this becomes quite meditative. Good stress relief because you're just sitting here, especially when you're doing abstracts, so you don't have to worry about did I get the face right or did I get the cat ears right or that sort of thing. If you're doing abstract, everything that you do is just based on the way that you're feeling at the moment. There isn't necessarily a right or wrong. And really, as I've said, there shouldn't be an art in general because you're showing your interpretation of something, but it is often more freeing when you're working on an abstract shape to just be able to play and not be so concerned about accurately portraying some sort of a object. And that's good for your brain. Be able to rest, relax, temporarily put aside whatever worries you've got in life, and just explore your creativity, build your mental strength and resiliency. Because everything you do in life is related to everything else that you do. The calmer you are while painting, the calmer you will be while tackling something else, which will help the something else go better, and so on. So try to look at your life as all interrelated with each other. And if you improve one area, then it improves other areas. Alright, so now we have some colors down here. Just looking at the computer screen, and this one here is still not as dark as I would like it. Let's just add another layer on there. There we go, that's getting better. That's getting better. Alright, so now we get into the world of blending. So we've got this orange. Let's add in, let's pull out a hair. Add in a little purple and green just because I happen to have it here in the mixing area. And I'm going to add a little darker brownish orange along the edges, just to add a little shadowy shading to this. Most painting and drawing is built up over layers, and you think about where shadows are if you're working to give a 3D effect. Where the light is in the scene, and where that would cause shadows to fall. I tend to put the light up in the top right corner so that it draws the shadows down into the bottom and the left. This is just the way I think about the world. So it's good to have different tones in your picture, so it's not all the exact same shade of orange, so that you've got a few little darker areas and lighter areas and so on. And it's good to have the sense of a little bit of depth. And it's up to you if you want to draw a very two-dimensional, purposeful, flat kind of image, and that is fine. It is your interpretation of this world and what you want to have happen in it. So now I'm going to do the same thing with my burnt sienna. I'm going to add it into this area over here. And I'm not choosing a particular area, I'm just choosing a place that has some browns and stuff in it, and some blacks just to make it a little darker. So that when I will go in here, it is still the burnt sienna, but see, it's got a bit darker hue to it. Have more shadows down here in these little nooks. It will be less shadowed up in the top where the light was hitting it. Little circle things. But then it's tricky. How does it look like it's an indented circle versus a bulged out circle? Maybe they look like bulging out circles. Sort of hard to tell. Now I clean my brush so it's just water. I'm just going to soften the edge a little by dragging water along it so that it isn't quite that kind of a sharp edge. Getting more cat hairs. Oh, I wonder why I have cat hairs in my piece. That's alright. I can get those out later. I'm just using water again to soften the edges of these shaded areas so it's not quite so abrupt. And in this area that was white, so a little less glaring white. Alright, so now I'm tempted to use some of the pearlescent stuff that I have. I don't think I'd want to use the silver, but maybe some of this gold that I still have over here. So we'll, oops, clear off my brush. So as mentioned, part of the benefit of watercolors is that when they dry, that's fine. You just re-wet them. So I have this little bit of gold here from a previous project. Oh, look, a cat here. I'm just going to put little gold dots down the middle. So they're not super obvious because the gold is a very close match to the orange that was already in there. But they add a bit of shimmer and just a little bit of extra texture in there. So you can barely even see it in the middle here. With this one. But it is definitely a shimmery spot that will keep shimmering as it dries. So now I'm thinking maybe I want to put some gold into these other areas. Alright. Some over here. To the center of these dots. Alright. I'll just put some little random dots in here. Alright, now we got some new stuff going on in our abstract interpretation. And something that I like about the Upton Town Hall is the little white lights and how they add that sort of starry glow to everything. So I think what I'm going to do is add a spattering of the white sparkle stuff to this. So let me show you how that works. So I'm going to close up my watercolor tin. out of the way. I'm going to get something to put underneath my watercolor painting because I don't want to spatter my whole desk. I'm going to spatter a bunch of it anyway. My cat's coming over to see what we're up to. Yes, you're a very good kitty. Very, very good kitty. But kitty, I don't want to spatter you. Come on. Out of the way. Alright, so what we're going to do, first I'm going to make sure my brush is nice and clean. Alright, get a clean brush. Alright, so you can't step on the keyboard. Clean brush. I'm going to get it thoroughly in this white. I'm going to try to make it a little liquidy so that it spatters well. And what we're going to do is we're going to flick the brush. And this is it's going to do what it's going to do, so you can't really control this process. So we're going to bring back the brush and just let it flick and put stuff where it's going to go. Right, so now we've got all sorts of little starry, sparkly, get some more. That was probably too big of a glob. So we're getting a little starry effect over everything. I have a different white that I often use for this, which is the Dr. Martin's Bleed Proof white, which is a very sharp, bright white, which is good for like starry skies and that sort of thing. But I didn't want that kind of effect here. I like this shimmery pearlescent white better because its purpose is not to cover up the scene and create giant pinpoints of light, but just to add more of a shimmer and a sense of texture in some of these areas, like these yellow fields, which were just pretty monochromatic before. So now they've got a little bit of shimmer to them. There we go. Alright, get that off the brush. Alright, so now, here, I'll take this off of here. So now if you look at that from different angles, hopefully you can see how there's a bit of shimmer to it. And right now it's wet, so there'll be an even extra bit of shimmer, but even when that dries, because this is a pearlescent white that I used, there will be little spots of shimmering white on it, which will add some texture and visual interest to it. Alright, so that was a wholly abstract design. It was inspired by the curves and shapes of the interior of the Upton Town Hall. So definitely get a visit when you can to the Upton Town Hall and see the beautiful innards of it, and then see what part of it inspires you to do something. You know, maybe it could be the rhythm of the beautiful railings over here on the side. Could be the grids and the colorful stained glass up here. You know, who knows what could be the thing that catches your eye. But that's the beauty of creativity. We all see something different. We all enjoy different aspects of our world. So thank you for joining me. I'd love to see what sorts of things you create. And have a wonderful day.